"The driver did it again," whispered the 7-year-old, clutching her notebook. When her mother saw the pages filled with childish handwriting, her hands began to shake. The clock on Jasmine's bedside table showed 6:15 a.m. when her mother's gentle voice cut through the morning silence. "Time to get up, baby. School day." The 7-year-old's eyes opened immediately, her small hands gripping the pink blanket. She didn't move for a few seconds, her heart already starting to beat faster. "Coming, Mama," she called back, her voice smaller than usual. Jasmine pushed herself up, her feet finding her fuzzy slippers on the worn carpet. The morning light filtered through her window, casting long shadows across her bedroom floor. In the kitchen, her mother stood at the counter, packing lunch into a brown paper bag. The smell of peanut butter and strawberry jam filled the small space. "Your favorite sandwich today?" she said, not turning around. "And I put in an extra juice box." Jasmine nodded, climbing onto her usual chair at the kitchen table. A bowl of Cheerios waited for her, the milk still cold. She picked up her spoon, watching the little circles swirl in the white liquid. "Eat up, baby. We don't want to be late." Her mother finally turned around, her nurse's scrubs already on, hair neatly tied back. She paused, noticing Jasmine's untouched cereal. "Everything okay?" "Yes, Mama." Jasmine forced a spoonful into her mouth, chewing slowly. "Just thinking about my presentation today. About what I want to be when I grow up." Her mother's face softened. "That's right. Today's the day. You've been practicing all week." "I'm going to tell them I want to be a teacher," Jasmine said, her voice growing stronger. "Like M.S. Peterson, and you'll be the best teacher there is." Her mother checked her watch. "Now hurry up with that breakfast. Time to get dressed." In her room, Jasmine pulled out her favorite turquoise dress from the closet. Her mother had ironed it the night before, and it hung wrinkle-free on its small hanger. She touched the soft fabric, remembering how happy she'd been when they found it at the thrift store. "Need help with the buttons?" her mother called from the doorway. "Yes, please." Jasmine slipped the dress over her head, turning so her mother could reach the back. The familiar routine of getting dressed usually calmed her, but today her stomach kept doing little flips. Her mother's fingers worked quickly with the buttons. "There we go. Now, let's do something special with your hair for your presentation." Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed while her mother sectioned her hair into two neat parts. The gentle tugging as her mother created two puffballs on either side of her head was soothing. "Pretty as a picture," her mother said, securing the second elastic band. At her small desk, Jasmine's pink backpack sat ready. She'd packed it the night before, double-checking everything. Her notebook with the presentation written in her best handwriting, pencil case, reading book, and homework folder. She picked it up, testing its weight. "Got everything?" her mother asked, helping her slip the straps over her shoulders. "Think so." Jasmine adjusted the straps, making sure they were even. They walked to the kitchen together, where her mother added the packed lunch to her backpack. "Remember what I always tell you? Hold my head high," Jasmine recited, "and be proud of who I am. That's my girl." Her mother kissed the top of her head. "Ready to head to the bus stop?" Jasmine's hands tightened on her backpack straps. "Yes," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. They stepped out into the morning air, joining the familiar walk to the bus stop 3 blocks away. Other kids and parents were already gathering there, their quiet conversations floating in the cool morning breeze. Jasmine tried to focus on her mother's hand holding hers, on the sound of their footsteps on the sidewalk, on anything except what was coming. The yellow bus turned the corner right on schedule, its diesel engine rumbling through the quiet neighborhood. Jasmine's steps slowed automatically. Her mother squeezed her hand. "There's Ashley and Marcus," her mother pointed out, trying to distract her. "And look, Katie brought her new puppy to see everyone off." But Jasmine's eyes were fixed on the bus's front window, where Mr. Thompson sat with his usual stern expression. The bus wheezed to a stop, its doors folding open with a hiss. Mr. Thompson's face appeared in the doorway, looking down at the line of children. Come on," he called impatiently. "We're on a schedule here." Jasmine was last in line. When she reached the steps, Mr. Thompson's foot was already tapping against the floor. "Hurry it up, girl. Ain't got all day." The first step was high. Jasmine had to grab the handrail with both hands to pull herself up. Her backpack shifted, throwing her slightly off balance. "Today, Mr. Thompson's voice boomed from above. She could feel her classmates watching, could hear the whispers starting. Her face grew hot as she managed the second step, then the third. Just as she reached the top step, Mr. Thompson's foot pressed the accelerator. The bus lurched forward. Jasmine stumbled, catching herself on a seat. Her knee hit the metal edge hard. She quickly slid into the nearest empty seat, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see her mother still standing at the bus stop watching. Jasmine raised her hand in a small wave, trying to smile. As the bus pulled away, she pulled her notebook from her backpack, holding it close to her chest. Inside were her carefully written words about wanting to be a teacher, about helping others learn and grow. She opened to the last page, where blank lines waited. Her pencil hovered over the paper, trembling slightly. The bus hit a bump, and Jasmine's pencil made an accidental mark on the page. She looked at it for a moment, then began to write in her shaky second-grade handwriting. Day 1. He did it again. The rest of the ride passed in a blur of streets and stops, the bus gradually filling with more students. No one sat next to Jasmine. She kept writing, her pencil moving steadily across the page, recording every detail she could remember. When the bus finally pulled up to the school, she quickly closed her notebook and tucked it away. As she stood to leave, Mr. Thompson's voice carried from the front. Maybe tomorrow you can learn to climb stairs like a big girl. A few kids snickered. Jasmine kept her eyes down, remembering her mother's words about holding her head high. But her hands shook as she gripped her backpack straps, and she could feel the bruise forming on her knee where she'd hit the seat. She was the last one off the bus, carefully taking each step down. On the sidewalk, she straightened her turquoise dress and touched her hair puffs to make sure they were still neat. The school building loomed ahead, and somewhere inside was her classroom where she'd have to stand up and give her presentation about wanting to be a teacher. But first, she had to find a quiet corner to finish writing down what had happened that morning. Because maybe, just maybe, if she wrote it all down, someone would finally believe her. The classroom buzzed with excitement as students took turns sharing their dreams for the future. Jasmine sat in her chair, fingers tracing the edge of her notebook, waiting for her name to be called. The bruise on her knee throbbed beneath her turquoise dress. Jasmine Williams, M.S. Peterson called, her warm smile encouraging. You're up next? The walk to the front of the classroom felt longer than usual. Jasmine clutched her notebook tight against her chest, her steps careful and measured. She turned to face her classmates, 20 pairs of eyes staring back at her. Her voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat and started again. I want to be a teacher. Ashley, her best friend in the front row, gave her a thumbs up. Jasmine's shoulders relaxed slightly. I want to help kids learn like M.S. Peterson does. I want to make school a safe place where everyone feels. The word safe caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to the window, where she could see the yellow buses parked in the lot. Go on, Jasmine S. Peterson encouraged. You're doing great. The rest of her presentation passed in a blur. When she returned to her seat, Ashley leaned over. That was really good, she whispered. But are you okay? You look kind of pale. Before Jasmine could answer, the lunch bell rang. Students rushed to grab their lunch boxes and line up at the door. Jasmine moved slower, making sure her notebook was securely in her backpack. In the cafeteria, she sat with Ashley and their usual group. The familiar sounds of lunch surrounded them. Sandwich bags crinkling, juice boxes being stabbed with straws, cheerful chatter about recess plans. Hey, did you guys see what happened on the bus this morning? Marcus, a third grader who rode their bus, spoke between bites of his apple. Jasmine's hand froze, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. Mr. Thompson was being mean again, Katie added, her voice low. He made the bus move before Jasmine was sitting down. He always does that to her, Ashley said, anger clear in her voice. My mom says, please don't tell, Jasmine interrupted, her words barely audible. It'll just make it worse. The table fell silent. Ashley reached over and squeezed her hand under the table. After lunch, during recess, Jasmine found a quiet spot under the big oak tree in the playground. She pulled out her notebook again, adding to her morning's entry. Her pencil moved quickly across the paper, recording the whispers, the looks, the way some kids laughed when Mr. Thompson made his comment. "What are you writing?" Jasmine jumped, slamming the notebook shut. Ashley stood there, concern written across her face. "Nothing," Jasmine said quickly. "Just stories." Ashley sat down next to her. "My mom asked about your bruises last week. The ones on your arm? She wanted to know if someone was being mean to you." Jasmine tugged her dress sleeve down, covering the fading yellow marks. "I'm just clumsy," she mumbled. "No, you're not." Ashley's voice was firm. "I see what happens on the bus. We all do." Tears pricked at Jasmine's eyes. She blinked them back hard. "Please don't tell anyone. Promise me." "But, promise." Ashley hesitated, then nodded. "I promise. But you should tell someone. Like Ms. Peterson, or your mom." The afternoon classes dragged by. Jasmine tried to focus on the math problems on the board, but her mind kept drifting to the bus ride home. Her stomach churned as the final bell approached. When the dismissal bell rang, she deliberately packed her bag slowly, letting most of the other kids leave first. Ms. Peterson noticed her lingering. "Everything okay, Jasmine? You seem a little distracted today." "Yes, ma'am." Jasmine forced a smile. "Just tired." The hallway was nearly empty by the time she reached the bus loading area. Mr. Thompson stood by the door, checking names off his list. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Almost made us late," he snapped. "Get on." Jasmine gripped the handrail, taking her first step up. Behind her, she heard Mr. Thompson's impatient grunt. Her hands started to shake. The bus lurched forward before she reached the top step. This time, she fell backward, her back hitting the steps hard. Her notebook flew from her hands, papers scattering across the bus floor. "Told you to hurry up, Mr. Thompson said, not even looking back. A few students snickered. Others quickly looked away. But Marcus, sitting near the front, stood up and started gathering her papers. "Here," he whispered, helping her up. "Don't let him see you cry." Jasmine nodded, fighting back tears as she collected her scattered notes. Her dress was dirty now, a dark smudge visible on the turquoise fabric. Her mother would notice. The ride home was longer than usual, each stop feeling like an eternity. Jasmine kept her eyes fixed on her notebook, adding new details to her growing record. Her hand shook as she wrote, making her usually neat handwriting messy and hard to read. When she finally got off at her stop, her mother was waiting, still in her nurse's scrubs from her day's shift. One look at Jasmine's dress, and her smile faded. "Baby, what happened to your dress?" "I fell," Jasmine said quickly. "At recess." Her mother knelt down, examining the dirt marks. "These look like bus floor marks, not playground dirt." She touched Jasmine's cheek. "Want to tell me what really happened?" Jasmine shook her head, clutching her notebook tighter. That evening, after dinner, Jasmine sat at her small desk, homework spread out before her. But instead of working on her math problems, she was adding more to her secret record. The pages were filling up quickly now, each entry more detailed than the last. A tear splashed onto the page, smudging the words. Jasmine quickly wiped her eyes with her sleeve, not wanting her mother to hear her crying from the next room. She could hear her mother on the phone in the kitchen, talking in her serious voice. "Yes, I'm noticing more bruises." "No, she won't tell me what's happening. I'm really worried." Jasmine closed her notebook, hiding it in the bottom of her backpack. She changed into her pajamas, carefully hanging up her dirty dress. The bruise on her knee had turned a deep purple, and her back ached from hitting the steps. In bed, she pulled her pink blanket up to her chin, trying to make herself as small as possible. Tomorrow was another school day, another bus ride, another chance for Mr. Thompson to... She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to think about her presentation instead, about wanting to be a teacher, about making school safe for everyone. But all she could see was Mr. Thompson's face in the big mirror above his seat, watching her struggle up the steps, his foot already moving toward the accelerator. The next morning, Jasmine woke up before her alarm. Her hands clutched the pink blanket as she stared at the ceiling, counting the glow-in-the-dark stars her mother had put up. 20 minutes until she had to get up. 20 minutes until the morning routine began. 20 minutes until her stomach clenched. She rolled over, curling into a tight ball. Not today, she whispered into her pillow. Please, not today. When her mother's footsteps approached her room, Jasmine pretended to be asleep. The door creaked open. Baby, time to get up? Her mother's voice was gentle, but Jasmine could hear the concern in it. I don't feel good, Jasmine mumbled, not opening her eyes. The bed dipped as her mother sat down, a cool hand touching her forehead. No fever. What hurts? My stomach. It wasn't exactly a lie. Her stomach was twisting itself into knots. Is it something else? Her mother's voice got softer. Something at school, maybe? Or on the way to school? Jasmine pulled the blanket higher, hiding her face. Can I stay home? Just today. There was a long pause. Then her mother sighed. Baby, look at me. Slowly, Jasmine lowered the blanket. Her mother's face was serious, worried lines around her eyes. You know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all that's bothering you? Jasmine nodded, but her eyes drifted to her backpack in the corner, where her notebook sat hidden at the bottom. I know something's wrong, her mother continued. I see it every morning before you leave, every afternoon when you come home. Please talk to me. For a moment, Jasmine almost did. The words were right there, pressing against her lips. But then she remembered Mr. Thompson's voice, his threats about troublemakers who complained. I'm okay, she whispered. Just tired. Her mother didn't look convinced, but she stood up. All right, let's get ready for school then. The morning routine felt different today. Her mother watched her more closely, noticed how Jasmine's hands trembled as she buttoned her fresh dress, saw how she barely touched her breakfast. At the bus stop, more parents than usual were gathered, talking in low voices. Jasmine caught fragments of their conversation. Getting worse every day. My son says he sees. Should report him. No proof, though. Ashley's mom approached Jasmine's mother, speaking quietly. Have you noticed anything unusual? With Jasmine gripped her mother's hand tighter, staring at the sidewalk. She could feel the adults looking at her. The familiar rumble of the bus engine made her whole body tense. As it turned the corner, several parents moved closer to their children, watching. Mr. Thompson seemed to notice the extra attention. His scowl was deeper than usual as he opened the doors. Line up. No dawdling. Jasmine was in the middle of the line today. Her mother had insisted, instead of letting her wait until last. As she approached the steps, she could feel everyone watching. She gripped the handrail, took her first step, then the second. Mr. Thompson's foot was already moving. Wait! Ashley's mom called out. She's not seated yet. The bus jerked forward anyway. Jasmine stumbled, but managed to grab a seat back, pulling herself up. She slid into an empty spot, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see the parents talking urgently among themselves. Her mother's face was a mask of worry. Mind your own business. Mr. Thompson shouted back at the parents. Then, under his breath, but loud enough for the front rows to hear, bunch of helicopter parents raising soft kids. Ashley slid into the seat next to Jasmine. My mom's going to talk to the school monitor, she whispered. She saw what he did. But Jasmine had heard this before. 2 weeks ago, when Marcus's dad had complained. The school monitor had watched for one day, seen nothing wrong, and left. After that, things had gotten worse. Jasmine pulled out her notebook, turning to a fresh page. Today's entry would be long. At school, she saw Ashley's mom talking to Mrs. Garcia, the school monitor. They kept looking over at the buses, pointing and shaking their heads. During morning break, Mrs. Garcia called Jasmine to her office. Jasmine, honey, she said, her voice sweet. Some parents are concerned about your bus rides. Is there anything you want to tell me? Jasmine stared at her shoes, at the scuff marks from all the times she'd fallen. No, ma'am. Are you sure? No one will be mad if you tell the truth. But Jasmine remembered what happened to Kevin last year when he complained about Mr. Thompson, how the driver had made him sit right behind him every day, commenting on everything he did wrong. I'm just clumsy, Jasmine repeated her practice line. That's all. Mrs. Garcia sighed. Well, if you ever want to talk, my door is always open. Back in class, Jasmine could hardly focus. Ms. Peterson had to call her name 3 times before she heard it. Sorry, she mumbled, her face hot with embarrassment. During lunch, she sat alone, writing in her notebook. The pages were almost full now. Each entry detailed another incident. The sudden starts, the harsh words, the accidental brake checks that sent kids tumbling. Ashley tried to join her, but Jasmine shook her head. I want to be alone. The afternoon dragged by in a blur of anxiety. When the final bell rang, Jasmine's hands were shaking so badly she could hardly zip her backpack. MS. Peterson stopped her at the door. Jasmine, you dropped this earlier? She held out a crumpled paper. Jasmine recognized it as one of her notebook pages, filled with her careful documentation. Her heart stopped. I didn't read it, MS. Peterson said quickly. But if you need to talk. Jasmine snatched the paper, stuffing it into her pocket. I'm going to be late for the bus, she whispered, running out. Mr. Thompson was in an especially bad mood. The parents' interference that morning had angered him. As each child boarded, he made comments about their speed, their manners, their everything. When it was Jasmine's turn, he didn't even wait for her to reach the top step. The bus lurched forward hard, then braked suddenly. She fell forward, her knees hitting the steps. Oops, he said, not even looking back. These old buses, you know how they are? Tears stung her eyes as she limped to a seat. Her knees were bleeding through her tights. She pulled out her notebook with trembling hands, but this time, something different happened. Marcus, sitting across the aisle, spoke up. We all saw that. We're all going to tell. Other kids nodded. Katie took out her phone, something they weren't supposed to have at school. I recorded it, she whispered. My mom said to get proof. Jasmine looked around at her classmates, saw the anger and determination on their faces. For the first time in weeks, she felt something besides fear. That evening, as her mother cleaned her scraped knees, Jasmine made a decision. Without a word, she went to her backpack and pulled out her notebook. Mama, she said, her voice shaking but clear. He did it again, but this time I can prove it. Her mother looked up, Band-Aid still in hand. What do you mean, baby? Jasmine held out her notebook. I wrote it all down. Every day. Everything he did. As her mother took the notebook, Jasmine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Tomorrow would be hard. The next day, too. But she wasn't alone anymore. She watched as her mother opened the notebook, saw her eyes widen as she read the careful entries, dated and detailed. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steel. First thing tomorrow, she said, pulling out her phone, we're making some calls. The next morning felt different. The air was heavier, charged with something Jasmine couldn't name. Her mother moved through their morning routine with quiet determination, checking her phone repeatedly. Remember, her mother said as she helped Jasmine with her dress, if anything happens today, anything at all, you tell me right away. No more hiding. Jasmine nodded, touching the fresh Band-Aids on her knees. Her notebook was in her backpack, but now her mother had taken photos of every page with her phone. Evidence, she called it. The walk to the bus stop was unusually quiet. Other parents were already gathered there, speaking in hushed voices. Ashley's mom approached them immediately. Did you see the video? She asked Jasmine's mother. Katie's mom shared it in the parent group chat last night. I saw it, Jasmine's mother replied, her voice tight. And I have more. She patted her phone in her pocket. The familiar rumble of the bus engine made everyone fall silent. As it rounded the corner, Jasmine felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. Mr. Thompson's face was dark with anger as he opened the doors. His eyes swept over the watching parents before landing on Jasmine. Well, he muttered, just loud enough for the front of the line to hear. Look who's causing trouble again. Jasmine's legs felt like lead as she approached the steps. The other kids were unusually quiet, watching. She grabbed the handrail, took her first step. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The bus lurched forward violently, then slammed to a stop. Jasmine lost her grip, falling backward. Her backpack flew open, spilling its contents across the bus steps. Her notebook skidded across the floor, papers scattering everywhere. Jasmine, her mother's scream cut through the morning air. But it wasn't over. As Jasmine tried to stand, Mr. Thompson hit the gas again. She fell hard, her head hitting the metal edge of a step. Stop the bus! Multiple parents were shouting now. Phones were out, recording. Mr. Thompson's voice boomed from above. This is what happens when kids don't listen, when they make up stories. Get my daughter off that bus. Jasmine's mother was already climbing the steps. The bus jerked forward once more. This time, several kids screamed. Marcus jumped from his seat, trying to help Jasmine up. Ashley was crying. Katie held her phone steady, still recording. You're hurting her, someone yelled. Jasmine's vision blurred. She could taste blood where she'd bit her lip. Her dress was torn, her knees bleeding again through fresh bandages. Then her mother was there, scooping her up, carrying her down the steps. Other parents rushed forward, some helping gather Jasmine's scattered belongings, others shouting at Mr. Thompson. Call the police. Get his badge number. Someone get the school on the phone. Jasmine buried her face in her mother's neck, trembling. She could hear Mr. Thompson shouting something about disrespectful kids and soft parenting, but his voice seemed far away. Baby? Her mother's voice was gentle but urgent. Baby, look at me. Does your head hurt? Are you dizzy? Jasmine nodded slightly, then wished she hadn't as pain shot through her skull. Hospital first, her mother decided. Then we're making those calls. Ashley's mom stepped forward. I've got the whole thing on video. Katie's recording too. He can't deny it this time. Other parents crowded around, offering their phones, their testimonies, their support. Someone had already called 911. In the distance, sirens wailed. Through her blurred vision, Jasmine saw Mr. Thompson finally step off the bus, his face red with anger. You're all making a big deal out of nothing. Kids these days can't handle. Handle what? Jasmine's mother's voice cut through his rant like a blade. Handle being assaulted? Handle being terrorized? Look at my daughter. The sirens grew closer. Red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. The police are coming, Ashley called from the bus window. And Principal Matthews is on his way too. Mr. Thompson's face changed. The anger drained away, replaced by something else. Fear. A police car pulled up, followed by an ambulance. 2 officers stepped out, taking in the scene. The scattered school supplies, the crying children, the angry parents, and Jasmine in her mother's arms, her turquoise dress torn and stained. What happened here? One officer asked, approaching them. Before anyone could answer, Katie climbed down from the bus, phone in hand. I have it all on video, sir. From today and yesterday. And Jasmine has a notebook. Marcus appeared next to her, holding Jasmine's battered notebook. She wrote everything down, every day, every time he hurt her. The officer took the notebook, flipped through its pages. His expression darkened. We'll need statements from everyone, he said. In those videos, paramedics were examining Jasmine now, shining lights in her eyes, asking her questions. Her mother never let go of her hand. Possible concussion, one paramedic said. We should take her in, get her checked out properly. Mr. Thompson tried to slip away toward the bus, but the second officer stopped him. Sir, we're going to need you to stay right here. More cars were arriving. Principal Matthews, the school superintendent, parents who had heard what happened and turned around. The quiet morning had turned into chaos. As the paramedics helped Jasmine onto a stretcher, she saw Ashley standing by the bus, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met. I'm sorry, Ashley called out. I'm sorry we didn't tell sooner. Jasmine wanted to say it wasn't their fault, that she had been scared too, but her head hurt too much to speak. Instead, she watched through the ambulance windows as the scene grew smaller. Mr. Thompson talking to the police, parents showing them videos on their phones, her notebook being carefully placed in an evidence bag. It's over now, her mother whispered, holding her hand as the ambulance pulled away. He can't hurt you anymore. Jasmine closed her eyes, feeling the gentle sway of the ambulance. For the first time in weeks, the knot in her stomach began to loosen. But one thought kept running through her mind. Tomorrow, she would still need to get to school. And the day after that. And the day after that. The last thing she saw before the ambulance turned the corner was Mr. Thompson being led to a police car, his hands behind his back, while dozens of phones recorded every moment. The emergency room lights buzzed overhead as doctors examined Jasmine. Her mother hadn't left her side, still holding her hand while nurses cleaned her cuts and checked her bruises. Mild concussion, the doctor said, gently touching the bump on Jasmine's head. She'll need to take it easy for a few days. A police officer stood in the doorway, notepad ready. Detective Roberts, she'd said her name was. She had kind eyes and spoke softly. Jasmine, Detective Roberts said, pulling up a chair. Your notebook is very important. Would it be okay if we talked about what you wrote? Jasmine looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, baby. Tell her everything. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine started talking. Her voice was quiet at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. She told them about the first time Mr. Thompson made the bus move before she was seated, about the bruises she'd hidden, about the times she'd fallen. Detective Roberts wrote everything down, asking gentle questions. And how long has this been happening? 3 months, Jasmine whispered, since he started driving our route. She kept track of every incident, her mother added, pulling out her phone. I took pictures of all her notebook entries last night, and there are videos from this morning. The detective nodded, her face serious. Videos from multiple parents, and now your detailed notes. This is very strong evidence, Jasmine. You did exactly the right thing by writing it all down. A nurse came in with paperwork for her mother to fill out. While they talked, Detective Roberts leaned closer to Jasmine. You know what I see when I look at you? She asked softly. I see a very brave girl who protected herself the best way she knew how. Those notes you kept? That's what real courage looks like. Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes. I was scared to tell. Of course you were. But you found another way to speak up. You wrote it down. That was very smart. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Ashley and her mother were there, along with Katie and Marcus and their parents. Can we see her? Ashley called out, her voice trembling. Detective Roberts looked at Jasmine's mother, who nodded. The small group filed in, their faces a mix of worry and relief. Katie stepped forward first, holding her phone. I uploaded the videos to a secure cloud drive, she said. My mom helped me. No one can delete them now. And I brought your backpack, Marcus added, setting it carefully by the bed. We found all your papers. Ashley couldn't hold back anymore. She rushed forward, hugging Jasmine carefully. I was so scared when you fell. There was blood, and she started crying. The school board is meeting tomorrow morning, Ashley's mom said. They're holding an emergency session. All the parents are going. Jasmine's mother squeezed her hand. I'll be there too. Principal Matthews is bringing your notebook. Speaking of the notebook, Detective Roberts said, would you like to tell your friends what happened after you left? About Mr. Thompson? The kids leaned in, eager to hear. Jasmine sat up straighter in her hospital bed. He got arrested, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. They put him in handcuffs. A collective gasp filled the room, followed by excited chatter. Really? In front of everyone? Did they take him to jail? Detective Roberts held up her hand. He's being questioned right now. Thanks to Jasmine's detailed notes and your videos, we have lots of evidence of ongoing abuse of a minor. That's a very serious charge. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means, Detective Roberts explained, that Mr. Thompson won't be driving any school buses anymore. Ever. Relief flooded Jasmine's face. Her mother noticed and pressed the nurse's call button. I think Jasmine needs some rest now, she said. The doctor said she has a concussion. As her friends prepared to leave, each one hugged her carefully. Katie left her phone number, written in purple ink. Text me when you feel better? Ashley promised to take notes in class for her. Marcus said his mom was making her favorite cookies. When they were gone, Jasmine slumped back against her pillows, suddenly exhausted. Her mother stroked her hair gently, avoiding the bump. Mama, she whispered. Yes, baby? I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Oh, baby, no. Don't apologize. You told me in your own way, when you were ready. Those notes you kept? That was you being braver than any 7-year-old should have to be. Detective Roberts, who had stayed behind, nodded. Your daughter is quite remarkable, she told Jasmine's mother. Most adults wouldn't think to document everything so carefully. A nurse arrived with discharge papers and care instructions for the concussion. Rest for a few days, she advised. No screens, no reading, just quiet time. As they prepared to leave, Detective Roberts handed Jasmine's mother her card. The school board meeting is at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll need Jasmine's statement eventually, but not until she's feeling better. In the parking lot, Jasmine's mother lifted her carefully into the car. The afternoon sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hospital grounds. "How about we stop for ice cream on the way home?" her mother suggested. "I think we both deserve a treat." Jasmine managed a small smile. "Can we get sprinkles?" "Extra sprinkles," her mother promised. At the ice cream shop, they sat in a quiet corner booth. Jasmine's hot fudge sundae was piled high with rainbow sprinkles. Her mother had barely touched her own ice cream, too busy checking messages on her phone. "The parents are organizing," she explained, "making sure everyone who saw anything is at that meeting tomorrow. Principal Matthews says they're bringing in counselors for any kids who need to talk." Jasmine swirled her spoon through the melting ice cream. "What about tomorrow? How will I get to school?" Her mother set down her phone. "You're staying home tomorrow, baby. Doctor's orders. After that, well, there's already a new bus driver assigned to our route. A lady named Mrs. Johnson. And I'll ride with you the first few days, just to make sure you feel safe." The word safe didn't make Jasmine's throat tight anymore. Instead, she felt something new: hope. That night, tucked into bed with extra pillows to help her sore head, Jasmine watched her mother typing on her phone. "Just sending a last message to the parents' group," she explained. "Everyone's sharing their statements for tomorrow's meeting. Will they believe us?" Jasmine asked softly. Her mother set down her phone, her expression fierce and protective. "With your notebook, the videos, and all the witnesses, they'll have to do more than believe us, baby. They'll have to make sure this never happens to another child." As she drifted off to sleep, Jasmine thought about her presentation, about wanting to be a teacher, about making school a safe place for everyone. For the first time in months, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. Morning light filtered through Jasmine's curtains as she woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Her head still ached, but not as badly as yesterday. She could hear her mother talking, her voice serious and determined. "Yes, Officer Roberts?" "No, she's still resting. The doctor said a few days at least." Jasmine sat up slowly, careful not to move too quickly. Her turquoise dress hung clean and mended on her closet door. Her mother must have stayed up late fixing it. "Baby!" Her mother appeared in the doorway, phone still in hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Jasmine said, touching the bump on her head gently. "Is that Detective Roberts?" Her mother nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. "She's at the school board meeting. They want to know if you feel up to talking to them. On the phone, not in person." Jasmine's hands twisted in her blanket. What would I have to say?" "Just tell them what you told the detective yesterday. About your notebook, about what happened on the bus. But only if you feel ready." The voices from her mother's phone grew louder. "Is that Jasmine? Is she awake?" Her mother held out the phone. "Want to say hi to Detective Roberts?" Jasmine took the phone carefully. "Hello." "Good morning, brave girl." Detective Roberts' warm voice came through clearly. "How's your head today?" "It hurts a little, but not as much." "I'm glad to hear that. Listen, Jasmine, I'm sitting here with the school board, Principal Matthews, and a lot of parents. They're all very concerned about what happened. Would you be willing to tell them about your notebook?" Jasmine looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay, you're on speaker now," Detective Roberts said. "Everyone can hear you." Jasmine took a deep breath. I started writing everything down after the first time he made me fall. I wrote the date and what happened, and if anyone saw it. That was very smart thinking," a new voice said. "Principal Matthews, can you tell us why you decided to keep notes?" "Because..." Jasmine's voice grew stronger as she remembered Detective Roberts calling her brave. "Because I knew someone would need to know the truth someday, and I didn't want to forget anything." There was a murmur of voices on the other end. Then another voice. "This is Mrs. Peterson, Jasmine. I want you to know how proud I am of you. You used your writing skills to protect yourself. That's exactly what a good teacher would do." Tears pricked at Jasmine's eyes. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Jasmine," Detective Roberts came back on. "Would you like to know what's happening here?" "Yes, please." "Well, the school board has seen your notebook and all the videos from yesterday. They're making some big changes. No driver will ever be allowed to move the bus until every student is safely seated. And they're installing cameras on all the buses. And Mr. Thompson, Jasmine whispered. He's still in custody, Detective Roberts assured her. He won't be driving any buses ever again. In fact, he'll probably be facing charges for what he did. Principal Matthews spoke again. We let you down, Jasmine. We should have listened better when parents tried to tell us something was wrong. But your notebook, your careful, detailed notes, those made it impossible to ignore anymore. You helped protect not just yourself, but other kids too. More voices joined in, parents she recognized. My Marcus talks about how brave you are. Katie says she wants to be strong like you. Ashley can't wait to see you back at school. Jasmine's mother wiped tears from her own eyes as she listened. There's someone else who'd like to speak to you, Detective Roberts said. Your new bus driver, Mrs. Johnson. A gentle, grandmotherly voice came on the line. Hello, Jasmine. I want you to know that when you're ready to come back to school, I'll be waiting. We'll take it as slow as you need. And your mother is welcome to ride with us until you feel comfortable. Thank you. Jasmine managed, her voice thick with emotion. The board is about to vote on the new safety measures, Detective Roberts explained. Would you like to stay on the line to hear? Jasmine nodded, then remembered they couldn't see her. Yes, please. She and her mother listened as the board members voted unanimously to install cameras, implement new safety procedures, and create a system for students to report concerns anonymously. One more thing, Principal Matthews added. We'd like to use Jasmine's notebook as a template. We want to create small journals for students to document any problems they experience, on buses, at school, anywhere. Would that be okay, Jasmine? Like my notebook? Exactly like yours. Because you showed us that even the youngest students can speak up if we give them the right tools. After the call ended, Jasmine sat quietly for a moment, processing everything she'd heard. Her mother watched her carefully. You okay, baby? Jasmine nodded slowly. They really listened. They heard me? Of course they did. Your voice is strong, even when it's writing instead of speaking. Later that morning, while Jasmine rested in bed with her favorite books nearby, though the doctor said no reading yet, visitors started arriving. First came Ashley and her mother, bringing homemade soup. Then Marcus and his promised cookies. Katie brought a hand-drawn get-well card signed by their whole class. Ms. Peterson stopped by during her lunch break, carrying a special package. The first one, she said, handing it to Jasmine. Hot off the printer. It was a small notebook bound in bright colors. On the cover it read, My Voice Matters, a student's journal. Open it, Ms. Peterson encouraged. Inside, on the first page, was a message, inspired by Jasmine Williams, who taught us that the power of truth can be written one page at a time. Jasmine ran her fingers over the words, remembering all the nights she'd written in her own notebook by nightlight, afraid but determined to record everything. We'll be giving these to every student in the district, Ms. Peterson explained, and teaching them how to use them, just like you did. Her mother, who had been quiet all morning, finally spoke. You wanted to be a teacher, baby. Looks like you already are one. That afternoon, Detective Roberts stopped by with news. Mr. Thompson had been formally charged. He would never work with children again. Your notebook was the key, she told Jasmine. Without your detailed records, it would have been much harder to prove a pattern of behavior. As the sun set on this quieter, healing day, Jasmine sat at her window, holding her new journal. The blank pages waited, ready for whatever words might need to be written. But for the first time in months, she didn't need to write about being afraid. Instead, she wrote something new. Today, they listened. Today, things changed. Today, I found out that even a small voice can make a big difference. Her mother called up from downstairs. Baby, Mrs. Johnson is here. She'd like to meet you properly before your first day back. Jasmine closed her journal, feeling stronger than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring changes, challenges, maybe even a few fears. But she wasn't facing them alone anymore. And she had plenty of blank pages left to fill with new, braver stories. 3 days later, Jasmine stood at her front door, wearing her freshly pressed turquoise dress. The bump on her head had faded to a dull ache, and her mother had helped her style her hair in neat puff balls, just the way she liked them. Ready? Her mother asked, holding Jasmine's hand. Jasmine clutched her new backpack, a gift from her classmates to replace the one that had been damaged. Inside was her new journal, still mostly empty except for that first hopeful entry. "I think so," she said, taking a deep breath. They walked to the bus stop together, but this morning felt different. Other parents and children were already gathered there, and when they saw Jasmine, a cheer went up. "Welcome back!" Ashley ran forward, hugging her friend. "We missed you," Marcus called out. "Look what we made." Katie pointed to a colorful banner hanging from a nearby tree. "Our hero, Jasmine." Jasmine's eyes went wide. "You did this for me?" "It was everyone's idea," Ashley explained. "We wanted your first day back to be special." The familiar sound of a bus engine approached, but this time, Jasmine didn't feel her stomach twist. As the yellow bus rounded the corner, she could see Mrs. Johnson's smiling face through the windshield. The bus stopped, and the doors opened with a gentle hiss. Mrs. Johnson stepped down, wearing a bright floral dress and a warm smile. "Good morning, Jasmine," she said softly. "Ready for a new start?" Jasmine nodded, looking up at the bus steps. They seemed less steep somehow. "Remember, Mrs. Johnson continued, your mother can ride with us as long as you need. And look what we got now." She pointed to new additions: a security camera above the driver's seat, another at the back of the bus, and signs posted clearly. "Bus will not move until all students are safely seated." Jasmine's mother squeezed her hand. "Want me to ride with you today?" To everyone's surprise, including her own, Jasmine shook her head. "I can do it." A murmur of admiration went through the gathered parents and children. "But," Jasmine added quickly, "can you watch me get on? Just today?" "Of course, baby. Every day if you want." Jasmine approached the steps, Ashley right behind her. Mrs. Johnson stood back, giving her plenty of space. "Take your time, dear," she said. "We're in no rush." The first step was easy. So was the second. On the third, Jasmine paused, memories of falls and bruises flashing through her mind. "You've got this," Ashley whispered behind her. Jasmine took the final step into the bus. The familiar interior looked different somehow, brighter, safer. She chose a seat near the front, and Ashley slid in beside her. "Everyone settled?" Mrs. Johnson asked, checking her mirrors carefully. Only when every child called out yes did she close the doors and put the bus in gear. The ride to school was filled with chatter and laughter. Mrs. Johnson played soft music on the radio, and at every stop, she waited patiently for each child to be properly seated. When they arrived at school, Principal Matthews was waiting in front of the building. As Jasmine stepped off the bus, he smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Ms. Williams," he said formally, as if addressing a respected colleague rather than a second grader. "We've made some changes while you were away. Would you like to see?" Inside, Jasmine saw new posters on the walls. "Your voice matters," and "Speak up, write it down." Outside every classroom was a small box labeled Student Concerns, with blank forms and pencils nearby. In her classroom, Ms. Peterson had created a special corner with comfortable pillows and a shelf of journals. "Sometimes," she explained to the class, "we need a quiet place to write down our thoughts and feelings." Jasmine's classmates had decorated her desk with drawings and welcome back cards. On her chair was a small package wrapped in bright paper. "Open it," the class urged. Inside was a beautiful pencil case filled with colorful pens and pencils. "For your new journal, Ms. Peterson explained. "Because important words deserve special tools to write them." During morning announcements, Principal Matthews' voice came over the speaker. "Students, today we welcome back someone who taught us all an important lesson about courage and speaking up. Jasmine Williams showed us that even the smallest voice deserves to be heard." Jasmine felt her face grow warm as her classmates applauded. At recess, something remarkable happened. Younger students she'd never met came up to her, showing her their new journals. "Did you really write down everything that happened?" a first grader asked. "How did you know what to say?" wondered another. "I started writing in mine too," a third grader confided. "About something that was scaring me." Jasmine found herself surrounded by children, all wanting to know how to use their journals. Without thinking, she sat down under her favorite oak tree and began to teach them. "Write the date first," she explained. "Then what happened, exactly as you remember it, and who was there, and how it made you feel." Ms. Peterson, watching from nearby, smiled proudly. "Looks like you're already becoming the teacher you wanted to be," she said quietly. After lunch, Jasmine's class had a special assembly about speaking up against bullying. The guidance counselor used Jasmine's story, without naming names, as an example of how to document problems and ask for help. "Sometimes," the counselor said, "the bravest thing we can do is tell our truth, even if we have to write it down first." The afternoon passed quickly, and soon it was time to go home. Jasmine packed her backpack carefully, making sure her new journal was secure inside. At the bus, Mrs. Johnson greeted each child by name. "Good first day back?" she asked Jasmine. "The best," Jasmine replied, climbing the steps confidently. The ride home was peaceful. Jasmine watched out the window as familiar streets passed by, remembering how different everything had felt just a week ago. At her stop, her mother was waiting, beaming with pride. "How was it, baby?" Jasmine ran to hug her. "I helped other kids learn how to use their journals," she said excitedly. Like a real teacher. That evening, Jasmine sat at her desk, opening her new journal. On a fresh page, she wrote, "Today I learned that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you find a way to speak your truth anyway. Sometimes with words, sometimes with writing, but always with hope that someone will listen." Her mother called her for dinner, but Jasmine added one more line, "P.S. Mrs. Johnson never starts the bus until everyone is ready, and she knows all our names by heart." As she closed her journal, Jasmine smiled. Tomorrow would be another good day. She could feel it. The day of the school board hearing arrived bright and clear. Jasmine stood in front of her mirror, her mother helping her put on a new dress, navy blue this time, with tiny white polka dots. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to," her mother reminded her, adjusting the collar. "Detective Roberts can read from your notebook." But Jasmine shook her head. "I want to tell them myself." The school board meeting room was packed. Parents, teachers, and administrators filled every seat. Television cameras lined the back wall. The story had made local news. Principal Matthews met them at the door. "Ready, Jasmine? You'll sit up front with the other students who are testifying." Ashley, Katie, and Marcus were already there, dressed in their best clothes. They waved Jasmine over to an empty chair between them. "Look," Katie whispered, pointing to a table where evidence was laid out. Jasmine's original notebook, printouts of photos showing her bruises, USB drives containing videos from that final day. The board president, Dr. Garcia, called the meeting to order. "We're here today to address the serious incidents of student endangerment on bus Route 23, driven by Mr. James Thompson." Detective Roberts stood first, presenting the police findings. She showed enlarged photos of Jasmine's notebook entries on a projection screen. "What we see here is a systematic pattern of abuse," she explained. A 7-year-old child documented each incident with remarkable clarity and detail. Mr. Thompson sat at a separate table with his lawyer, his face pale and tight. He didn't look at anyone. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, her mother squeezed her hand before she walked to the podium. Phone books had been stacked on the chair so she could reach the microphone. "My name is Jasmine Williams," she began, her voice small but clear in the quiet room. "I want to be a teacher when I grow up. Teachers are supposed to keep kids safe." She unfolded a paper where she'd written her statement. "Mr. Thompson didn't keep us safe. He made the bus move before we could sit down. He made me fall on purpose. He said mean things when we cried." Her voice grew stronger. "I was scared to tell at first, so I wrote it down instead. Every day, everything that happened. Because I knew somebody needed to know the truth." She looked directly at Mr. Thompson for the first time. "You hurt me. You hurt other kids too. But we're not scared anymore. Because now everybody knows the truth." The room was silent when she finished. Then Ashley stood up. "I want to speak too." One by one, other students came forward. They told their stories of seeing Jasmine fall, of feeling helpless, of being afraid themselves. Marcus described helping Jasmine gather her scattered papers. Katie played her videos for the board. Other parents shared their children's stories. Mr. Thompson's lawyer tried to argue that kids sometimes fall, that bus drivers have challenging jobs, that his client meant no harm. But then Dr. Garcia held up Jasmine's notebook. 23 incidents documented in detail. Multiple witnesses, video evidence. And most damning of all, a clear pattern of targeting the most vulnerable students. The board's vote was unanimous. Mr. Thompson's license was permanently revoked. He would face criminal charges, and the school district would implement sweeping changes to bus safety. Principal Matthews stood to announce the new policies. Cameras on every bus, written safety protocols, a new reporting system for students, regular driver evaluations, parent volunteers welcome to ride along, and most importantly, student journals available to anyone who needed them. These changes, he said, come too late for the children who were hurt. But thanks to one brave student who chose to document everything, we can ensure it never happens again. After the formal proceedings, reporters wanted to interview Jasmine. Her mother started to decline, but Jasmine tugged her sleeve. "It's okay, Mama. I want to talk to them." The local news reporter knelt down to Jasmine's level. "What made you decide to write everything down?" Jasmine thought for a moment. "Because paper listens, and once something's written down, nobody can say it didn't happen." That quote would appear in the next day's newspaper, alongside a photo of Jasmine holding her notebook. But not the original one, that was now tagged as evidence. Instead, she held up one of the new student journals that bore her inspiring message on the cover. Later that afternoon, back at school, Jasmine's class held a small celebration. Ms. Peterson had brought cupcakes, and everyone wanted to hear about the hearing. "Were you scared?" a classmate asked. "Did he go to jail? Did you see yourself on TV?" But Jasmine was more interested in the journals she saw on several desks. "Are you using them?" she asked. One girl nodded shyly. "I wrote about something that happened at recess." Ms. Peterson helped me tell the principal. "And did they listen?" "Yes. They fixed the problem the very next day." Ms. Peterson gathered the class together. "Jasmine taught us all something important. Our voices matter. Whether we speak up loud and clear or write our truth quietly on paper, we deserve to be heard." On the bus ride home, Mrs. Johnson hummed along with the radio while her passengers chatted happily. At each stop, she waited patiently, checking that everyone was safely seated. When Jasmine got off at her stop, Mrs. Johnson called out, "Proud of you, dear. You changed things for the better." That evening, news coverage of the hearing played on TV. Jasmine sat with her mother, watching as cameras showed Mr. Thompson leaving the building in handcuffs. "Are you okay, baby?" her mother asked. Jasmine nodded. "He can't hurt anyone anymore. That's what matters." She opened her new journal to a fresh page and wrote, "Today justice happened. Not just for me, but for every kid who was ever scared to speak up. Now they know that their words have power, even if they have to write them down first." Her mother read over her shoulder. "You know what, baby? You're already teaching. Every child who picks up one of those journals is learning from you." Jasmine smiled, adding one final line to her entry. "P.S. Maybe I don't have to wait until I grow up to be a teacher. Maybe I can help make schools safer right now, one journal at a time." A month had passed since the hearing. Spring had arrived, bringing warm breezes and cherry blossoms to the schoolyard. Jasmine stood at her bus stop, no longer counting the steps it would take to reach the door. "Good morning, sunshine," Mrs. Johnson called out as she opened the bus doors. "Got a new student riding with us today." A small girl with braids stood nervously at the bottom step, clutching her backpack. Jasmine recognized that look. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. "Hi," Jasmine said, stepping forward. "I'm Jasmine. Want to sit with me?" The girl nodded, relief washing over her face. "I'm Maya. It's my first day." "Don't worry," Jasmine assured her, helping Maya up the steps. "Mrs. Johnson makes sure everyone's safe. Watch." Sure enough, Mrs. Johnson waited until they were both settled in their seat before slowly pulling away from the curb. "Everyone good back there?" she called out cheerfully. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson," the children chorused. Maya relaxed slightly. "At my old school, the bus driver was mean." Jasmine reached in her backpack and pulled out an extra journal. She kept spares now, just in case. "Here, this is for you." Maya took the journal, running her fingers over the cover message. "My voice matters," she read aloud. If anything ever scares you, Jasmine explained, you can write it down. Then tell a grown-up you trust. That's what I did. Other kids leaned over their seats, eager to share their own stories. Jasmine taught us how to use our journals. She's the reason we have cameras on the bus now. She helped make everything safer. Maya's eyes widened. Really? Before Jasmine could respond, the bus arrived at school. Principal Matthews was outside, greeting students as usual. He smiled warmly when he saw Jasmine helping Maya down the steps. "Ah, our new student," he said. "I see you've already met our resident hero." Maya looked at Jasmine with newfound appreciation. "Hero?" Jasmine blushed. "I just wrote down what happened. That's all." "Sometimes," Principal Matthews said, "that's exactly what a hero does." "Now, Maya, would you like Jasmine to show you around?" Inside the school, Jasmine pointed out the new features. The concern boxes outside each classroom, the quiet corners with journal supplies, the posters encouraging students to speak up. "This is all because of you?" Maya asked, clutching her new journal. "Because of everyone who was brave enough to tell the truth," Jasmine corrected. "Look." She led Maya to a special bulletin board near the office. Student Voices was written across the top, and below were success stories, all anonymous, of problems solved because children had spoken up. Someone wrote about playground bullying, and now we have more monitors at recess. Another kid wrote about feeling lonely at lunch, so we started the friendship table. Someone else wrote about being scared of math, and now we have study buddies. In MS Peterson's classroom, the morning began with journal time. Students could write about anything they wanted, good or bad, big or small. "Maya, Ness," Peterson called out, "would you like to tell the class about your old school?" Maya hesitated, then opened her new journal. "Can I write it down first, like Jasmine did?" "Of course, Mess." Peterson smiled. "Take all the time you need." During recess, Jasmine saw Maya writing intently under the oak tree. She remembered sitting in that same spot, recording her own fears months ago. Ashley joined them, bringing her journal too. "We have a journal club now," she explained to Maya. "We meet here every recess. Sometimes we write, sometimes we talk, sometimes we just sit together." More students gathered around, showing Maya their journals, sharing stories of changes they'd helped make happen. "Remember," Jasmine said softly, "you're not alone anymore." At lunch, Maya sat with Jasmine and her friends. She'd filled several pages in her journal already. "I wrote about my old bus driver," she admitted. "He used to yell a lot. Do you want to put it in the concern box?" Jasmine offered. "Principal Matthews reads them every day." Maya thought for a moment, then nodded. Together, they walked to the nearest box. Maya slipped her paper through the slot. "Now what happens?" she asked. "Now they listen," Jasmine assured her. "They always listen now." That afternoon, on the bus ride home, Mrs. Johnson made an announcement. "I hear it's Maya's birthday next week. Shall we sing?" The whole bus erupted in song, making Maya laugh with delight. Jasmine watched her new friend's face light up and knew exactly what she'd write in her journal that evening. At home, Jasmine sat at her desk, opening her latest journal, her third one since that first notebook that changed everything. "Dear Journal," she wrote, "today I helped another kid find her voice. Maya was scared just like I used to be, but now she knows she doesn't have to be silent. None of us do." She paused, thinking about how much had changed. Mr. Thompson was awaiting trial. The school had become a model for other districts wanting to implement similar safety measures. And best of all, students were speaking up, writing down, being heard. MS Peterson says I'm already teaching, she continued writing. Not with a classroom or a blackboard, but with journals and kindness and truth. Maybe that's what being a real teacher means, helping others find their strength. Her mother called her for dinner, but Jasmine had one more thing to add. P.S. Maya smiled on the bus ride home today. Really smiled, like she felt safe. That's how I know we're doing things right now. That's how I know our voices matter. She closed her journal and stood up, straightening her polka dot dress. Outside her window, she could see the bus stop where everything had started. But it wasn't a place of fear anymore. Now it was just the beginning of a journey, not just for her, but for every child who needed to know that their voice, whether spoken or written, deserved to be heard. And tomorrow? Tomorrow she would help more kids find their voices, one journal page at a time. Because that's what teachers do. That's what heroes do. That's what Jasmine Williams does.